All right. Well, how do we get here? How do we get here in this space for grace that we call a heart to heart? How did we get here? I know you know it well, followed your Zoom link, but really, a little deeper question is how did we get here? Oftentimes, I say, well, Merton got us here because Merton brought me to Kentucky and the monastery, et cetera, et cetera. But it really goes back farther than that. Go back 57 years, and I finally got the courage up to ask this girl out, beautiful girl, and who I'd been sort of eyeing in high school classes for a while and just didn't have the nerve to ask her out. Well, I finally asked her out, and we've been together more or less ever since. 57 years now. Well, today's her birthday, and she's starting her 71st day of her 75th year. And so I wanted to do a poem that I wrote about Pam. I wrote this 6 years ago, and there would be no here. There would be no loose leaf hollow. There might be something else. You might be on some other Zoom thing, but it wouldn't be this one if I hadn't met this girl and asked her out between our junior and senior year, the summer between junior and senior year. And you know, there was ups and downs in the 57 years. She hung with me. It's not easy to stay married to a workaholic. That was our first kind of hurdle. Well, here's a poem I wrote for her 6 years ago, just to honor her. She's off at the cathedral in town singing in the choir, which is it does it for her on Sundays. You know, it's what she does. So here's the poem. I wrote it 6 years ago on our anniversary. Hey, I'm totally on board with Rumi and all his Sufi pals who see everything in the universe as a blessing. And I'm totally down with their take on the fact that almost all of the blessings are pretty well disguised. My beloved wife and companion for life was, is, and always will be the greatest undisguised blessing of my life. Pam is as beautiful, natural, and graceful as the garden she has nurtured for decades here at Loose Leaf Hollow. This beauty that stuns all comers to our retreat house flows directly from Pam's heart and soul. Even a blind pig can stumble upon a truffle sometimes. Even a bumbling Italian can recognize such amazing grace. Yeah, this was called a blessing in disguise. So happy birthday there. And it is true that I don't think I would have been here. I don't know where I'd be, but had I not met Pam all those years ago. And we're going to, for the third time, show a slideshow of those folks who made the journey to Loose Leaf Hollow a couple weeks ago, a couple Saturdays ago, because people have missed. You know, I've done it twice, and now I'll do it the third time. So if you missed it, and if you didn't miss it, like I did, I've watched it many times. It'll warm your heart. So we'll see a picture of the community as we gathered. None of that would have happened without her. Also, honestly, you know, as the marriage broke down in the 80s and we went through 6 months of hell known as counseling, therapy, when we came out of that, we moved to Kentucky. And we just felt like we could do anything if we could resurrect a marriage. So we moved here mostly because I had been to the monastery a couple of times with boys, and I started reading Merton. And I want to learn from these monks. Poems are really the only way to talk about what really can't be talked about. So I've got a couple more poems for you. But first, a little bit about one of my first things I discovered when I went to the monastery Trappist monasteries are all built the same. They're built in a kind of, the monks live in a kind of square, four-sided, and where they live all around. And in the very center of all Trappist monasteries, uh, in what they call the cloister, is a fountain. In the very center, a fountain. And the one, when you look out the window from the up in the loft, you can look up out the window and see there. It's like a little small little town square. They got lights there, but the center is the fountain. And this particular order, the Trappists, so called, uh, they originated as a reform of the Benedictine order, and they started in Citeaux in France, and Citeaux meant the fountain, the cistern, and it was a place that did have a natural upwelling of groundwater, and so they maintained that kind of fountain in their architecture, uh, and I was also struck by hanging over the retreat house. As I walked in, I brought like 25 crazy Houston Cowboys that I was teaching in high school 2 years in a row. But first thing I saw hanging over the entrance uh, to the place was the words "God alone." And reflecting back on a couple of talks ago, that struck me. These guys are shaped. Merton was shaped. Thomas Keating, these two great teachers of mine, were shaped by the end they lived for. And they boiled it down to two words: God alone. And there's a connection between that and the fountain. In the middle of the whole place was this fountain. Yeah. So anyway, this is the poem of the week. I never know where the poems are coming from. This one came from just a little bit of resonance from Susan Nance's great talk from last week, where she talked about ripples, how the ripple effect is. Well, we're still with the ripple effect. This is called "There Is a Fountain." Far, far out beyond the houses of money, burning with unquenchable desire, there is a fallow field, and in its center there is a fountain waiting just for you. At first, only the Grateful Dead or the wayless pilgrims managed to stumble into this abandoned field. And in a gathering of spirits, begin to dance around this fountain and sing. Still, the great hunter invites us all, no matter how lonely, to quench our thirst at this festival of friends who dance and sing a simple song. Reach out your hand if your cup is empty. If your cup is full, may it be again. Let it be known there is a fountain that was not made by the hands of men. Reach out your hand if your cup is empty. If your cup is full, may it be again. Let it be known there is a fountain that was not made by the hands of men. I just want to reflect on that a little bit. And then we have a sacred poem to end off with from the past. There's a fountain. Far, far out beyond the houses of money, burning with unquenchable desire, there is a fallow field, and in its center, there is a fountain waiting just for you. The houses of money, burning with unquenchable desire. It's sort of how it feels to live in this culture. It's a culture of unquenchable desire because we're one click away from the next thing that's going to do it for us. I think it's very hard in a way to find the fountain in this culture because we're told it's everywhere else. And we're told you can find it at Amazon or Wayfair or Viking Cruise or whatever. Nothing wrong with those things. But Tibetan, 14th century Tibetan, he lived about the same time in Tibet that Meister Eckhart was living in Rhineland, Germany. He said worldly pleasures are like salt water. The deeper you drink, the thirstier you become. And then he says, any object you attach to, right away, let it go. So this is this attachment to getting this thing, then this thing. I mean, this is our culture. We have to really see things the way they are. We're a consumer culture. We don't say we're a sacred culture. They call all of us consumers. And I think it's just part of the problem right there. Far, far out beyond the houses of money burning with unquenchable desire, there is a fallow field. A fallow field is a field that is left to rest. It's unworked. That's what's going on in the fields at the end of my walk. When I hit the end of the road and double back, I walk through this. These fields are just, they normally would be in corn by now, but there isn't any corn there for whatever reason. And it's just fallow. It's left to rest. There is a fallow field, and in its center, there's a fountain waiting just for you. At first, only the Grateful Dead and the wayless pilgrims managed to stumble into this abandoned field. Yeah, I didn't realize it, but they're stumbling in the poem. Even a blind Italian can stumble into something. There is a lot about that. How did we all get here? One way or another, we stumbled here. As Rohr would say, in the second half of life, you hit the stumbling stone. You fall. Something, everything that was working doesn't work anymore. And at first, only the Grateful Dead and the wayless pilgrims managed to stumble into this abandoned field. And in a gathering of spirits, begin to dance around this fountain and sing. Still, the great hunter invites us all, no matter how lonely, to quench our thirst at this festival of friends who dance and sing a simple song. Well, here we are. I mean, that's, especially if you're new, like maybe the first day you just dropped in for, who knows how you found this thing. I don't advertise really, but here you are. And you're here in a festival of friends. That's what I like to think of this as. And who dance and sing a simple song. This is the song. Reach out your hand if your cup is empty. If your cup is full, may it be again. Let it be known there is a fountain that was not made by the hands of men. Sometimes we come with an empty cup here. It's a good way to come. Sometimes our cup is full. Well, may it be again. Let it be known. This is really the jumping off point for really making some progress in whatever contemplative tradition, in whatever religion you happen to stumble into. Let it be known there is a fountain that was not made by the hands of men. In other words, there's something that came before all this and is still here, not made by the hands of men. Now, all of the traditions talk about this. They use different words. They use different poems to talk about what can't be talked about. You can't really talk about this fountain. Nobody believed Jesus. Probably very few people believed the Buddha when he said that this fountain was in you. Different words. It's like tomato, tomato, whether you Jesus didn't call it the kingdom of God. He called it Malkuta. Buddha called it the Buddha nature, the awakened nature. Different strokes for different folks, but they're all pointing to the same thing, that there is this thing in each of us, this fountain, this source of fresh water, of living water. One of the great meetings in the Gospels talking about Jesus was Jesus met the woman at the well. A, she wasn't Jewish. No rabbi would talk to anybody who wasn't Jewish. B, rabbis at that time wouldn't even talk to a woman. They weren't worthy enough. So Jesus talks to this woman who's not even Jewish, and he said, "What are you doing here?" And they have a little discussion, and there's a lot in this, but basically she came to get the water at a time when nobody else would be at the well. There's a backstory to that. It's a lovely parable. But he says, well, hey, I can show you where you can get water that will slake your thirst forever. And she said, where is that? She wanted to know that. Yeah. And there is a fountain, and it's in you. When Jesus said, the translation, they said the kingdom of heaven is within you. Who believed that? How many Christians believe that now? Yeah, but the Buddha said the same thing. The same thing is in Judaism. It's in Islam. It's in the Hindu tradition, or the oldest tradition. The God in me greets the God in you. It becomes like a kind of habit, but really that's a profound message when you put the two hands become one heart. Yeah. There's a fountain. Well, what is this fountain? Because we're talking poetry now. We're talking metaphor. We're talking, the only way to talk about this is to actually see something is like another, and because you can't really get at it directly. Well, you could call the fountain the Buddha nature, the kingdom of heaven. You could call it God alone, as the Trappists call it. Or you could call it love. It's tomato. Love's a good one. And but we have to deconstruct love a little bit, because love is, you love a Subaru, or love New York, or it's been sort of destroyed as a word. That's something our culture really does. We destroy words. We have politicians who speak words that mean nothing now because they destroyed all the essence of it. And so love, we have to talk a little bit about the fountain of love, and you could call it something else, but I like love. There's a sense that love brought us all here, the longing for it. And when we talk about love in this context, it doesn't mean an affect. It doesn't mean an emotion at all, because there is affective love, but the Greeks had 9 different words for love. We've sort of destroyed the one we have. They use separate shades of it. But the love I'm talking about, that's the fountain, is almost it's a totally new way. A new consciousness of the way we see what's right in front of our nose. It has to do with the heart. It has to do with moving into the heart. That's why this is called heart to heart. The mind, and when we talk about mind, or the Buddhists talk about small mind, we're talking about the left brain. Very handy little item, the left brain. You invented Zoom, thank goodness. You balance your checkbook. You keep the roof over your head, and hopefully the wolf away from the door. It's handy, but if it's the only lens in which you see the world, you'd be looking at 25 separate squares here. Maybe one day somebody on Zoom will figure a way to put a little diamond in the center and have these 25 things going around in a circle, all looking at that center point. I don't know if that's possible, But, but if you're looking at this group from the left brain, you see 25 separate people here. That's how the left brain does it. That's how the left brain works in transactional level of reality. And it's good. One thing is not like the other to the left brain. And that's how we can arrange things. You have a cat and a dog. One of these things is not like the other. We teach it on Sesame Street. So we're educating the left brain. Mostly, that's the education I got growing up. I like this. I wrote a poem about, in my 30s when I'd been married for, almost 10 years. I was just a brain on a stick. The heart wasn't really operating, although it was there. I was just figuring it all out, and in the process, destroying my marriage. But that's another story. But so that's good, but it's not a way to live. Now, if you've been around here for a while, some of us have been here going on to 4 years now, you don't see the squares so much. You're starting to see. Now, how does the heart see? It's a different level of consciousness. The heart sees everything as a whole. So love really means a kind of holistic resonance. It's not discriminative. It doesn't say good and bad. Rumi says, out beyond, out beyond thoughts. He said, there's a field. Yeah, so it's trying to make this shift. The Orthodox Eastern Christians have this phrase, dropping the mind into the heart. Essentially, that's what we do in a few minutes when we go to silent meditation. We try to find a way to drop the mind into the heart. The heart sees things as a whole. We have a body, we have a mind, left brain, and then we have the only thing that's possible of bringing these two things together. Making the true one. And that's what they call non-dual consciousness. Jesus was a guy who was teaching non-duality, as was the Buddha. But you can't understand the gospel with the kind of mind. You can't understand the gospel with the left brain. You can't understand the Buddhist sutras. You can't really understand meditation looking at it from the left brain. We have to drop the mind into the heart. You see. And another way of looking at it is in the mind, everything out there is an it. It's kind of I-it relationship. I'm looking at 25 other people here. Okay, that's how the mind looks at it. It turns everything into an it to be in some ways arranged. That's what analysis is, very helpful for transaction, but for transformation, it's always been the heart. The Tibetans actually, which are the last incarnation of what Buddha started 1,000 years earlier, the Tibetans came, they had this mysterious way of actually doing it. They're the ones who understand the heart the best in the Tibetans. In the Buddhist world, I think. They've taken it the farthest. Yeah. But it's the same thing. When you're looking at the world from the heart, it's I. It's an I thou, as Buber says. There's not an object out there, which if somebody's objectified, then you can, they're a little lower than you, you can manipulate them for your own purposes. But an I thou relationship, an I relate. The Rastafarians talk about I. When you hear Bob Marley, he's always going I, because that's the teaching that you're I, and Jah's I, God's I, same thing. Well, you get back to Meister Eckhart in the 14th century. The eye with which I see God is the eye with which God sees me. I. And then you put it together. It's interesting in Eastern Orthodox icons, the sign for peace is not this. It's this. You see in the icons, Jesus is doing this. He's not doing this. The two become one. That's non-duality. And that's really interesting that they knew that back then. The Eastern Orthodox are the ones who saw that. because Christianity split off when Roman Christianity, European Christianity went with the empire. Well, the empire is the personification of I, it. There's Caesar and everybody else is an it, you know. So this is consciousness. Now I want you to. We'll end with this. This is a great poem by a Tibetan, who many of you have heard this before, but I'll break it down a little bit. It's a short poem by Khenpo Rinpoche, who was a 20th century Tibetan teacher. He's passed away now, and his pupil, little 8-year-old Sogyal Rinpoche, was in training to be, a little Tulku, as they called a little Rinpoche, for reincarnation. He learned this, and he passed it on to me and to the rest of the world. Now, there's a couple words in this poem that are Buddhist lingo. One would be karma. Karma means literally doing. Okay. Meditation is about being. Karma is about doing. And doing means it starts with thoughts. You think a hateful thought. Words, the words come out of your mouth, hate speech. And then you do something hateful. Okay, so those are increasing levels of those ripples, in the still pond. You throw a rock in, throw a little pebble in, little ripples. You throw a little bigger rock in, bigger. You pull a boulder in. It's a tsunami. So karma is what you do, has ripples, has an effect. Okay, so we're talking, that's karma. And then the other Buddhist word that you might not know is samsara. Samsara is their word for like hell. Okay. Hell, they know you can you don't have to die to go to hell. They know you can go to hell in this lifetime. Hell is kind of a psychological state. Okay. And so one Buddhist told me, he said, you really want to know what samsara feels like? He says, go to your toilet and flush it and look at what happens. It's that spiral downward. Once you get into it, it's a kind of descending spiral where you sort of get sucked in. So anyway, that's those two words. And here's the poem that actually talks about a very one of the greatest forms of meditation in the Buddhist world. It's called the Dzogchen, which is you do nothing. The Zen guys call it shikantaza, just sitting, no doing. So it goes like this: rest in natural great peace. This exhausted mind, beaten helplessly by karma and neurotic thought, like the relentless fury of the pounding waves in the infinite ocean of samsara. Rest in natural great peace. Rest in natural great peace. Rest in natural great peace. This exhausted mind, who doesn't know that feeling, beaten helpless by karma and neurotic thought. Now, the definition of a neurotic thought in Buddhism, in reality, is a self-centered thought. Then when you're in the self-centered, there's me and there's all these other its out there. And so there's always that separation. So, and we cycle into it at the drop of a hat. I do. So when we're about to go to meditation is really simple. There's nothing to do. You sit. The only doing happens when all of a sudden, you're sitting here in your body, heart, mind, and then you're not. Then you spin out, pulled by some magnetic force, and now you're thinking all about your life, all about your problems. Well, everybody does this. Oh, I'm going to get even with that person. Maybe they're even nice thoughts about what I'm going to do with my life or whatever, but it's still you're into the self-centered nature. So when you realize that, you return and you release that and you just relax in natural great peace. Now, when he's talking about natural great peace, it's natural. It's not built by the peace. It's not built by the hands of men. It's natural, and you can rest in it. It's always there. It's always there. And whether you called it natural great peace or natural great love or natural great joy, that kind of little inner quantum trinity, those things, they don't come and go. They're interacting. They're dancing with each other all the time. They depend on each other. Love and peace and joy depend on each other. The love is what draws us back. The joy is in the letting go, the release, and then the peace is in the resting. Yeah, it's like a kind of inner trinity that's always with us, you see. So today, we've been using chant to help us transition from the mind and drop into the heart. Why does chant work? Well, because it's repetitive and there's really nothing to think about. And if you actually we use Tibetan chant, Om Mani Padme Hum, that's hail, the jewel in the heart of the lotus. That's like saying, hail the fountain that's in your own heart, you see. So Om Mani Padme Hum, as the Tibetans would say. So we'll do some of that chant. Well, we got this great song that Jill discovered by women of the world, and they just chant this for a few minutes. And if for some reason you'd rather just sit in total silence, well, just mute it. You could mute it, and then you won't. I think you can just turn down your thing to zero if you like. But most people, if you chant it or just listen to it, somehow the repetition, it's a heart chant. Some of us just put our hand over our heart and chant it. Don't need to do that, but you're invited. You can do that. Chant it for yourself, or just listen to it. Either way, any way you want it, it moves you towards that gravity that is the heart. Okay, I think that's good for the talk, Jill.